What's up, party people? Welcome to a special edition of DJ to DJ. I'm your man, DJ Fernando G, and today it is my pleasure to bring my good friend from many, many years, Fernando Perez, on board to talk about radio DJ mixing. What's up, Tocayo? How you doing?
Tocayo, good. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm honored and ready to have fun and talk about radio, music, DJs, and anything you want to talk about. So
That's what
thanks,
I'm talking
thanks
about.
for the invite.
It's my pleasure, brother. So, let's first kick off by saying you and I are going to be calling each other Tocayo a
That's
lot.
right.
And for those non-Spanish speaking individuals, Tocayo is like namesake because I'm Fernando, he's Fernando, and in Spanish we call ourselves Tocayo.
Tocayo, that's right.
Tocayo, what's up, man? So when you hear us say Tocayo, don't think that it's some special code or DJ thing that's going. No, it's just namesake. All right, so let's talk about your origins. You and I met. This was back in the early '90s over at Super Estrella, here in Los Angeles, California. And what was it that you were doing at the time?
That's right, Tocayo. I started my radio career at Super Estrella as an intern. Actually, um, I was very interested in the radio world since I was a teenager. And when I got into college and studying radio and TV broadcasting, in my first broadcasting class, the teacher, who was a reporter for a news station here in LA, said, the most important thing that I would recommend for you to do is to look for an internship. So that's the first thing that I knew I had to do to learn about the business. So I started calling up every Spanish language radio station in town because I wanted to be involved with Spanish language radio.
Mm-hmm.
And after getting through to just leaving voicemails and never ever hearing from anybody, Edgar Pineda, our friend Edgar Pineda, actually picked up the phone at Super Estrella, and it was the first, I think it was the first or second human that I was able to speak to and ask him for an internship. And he graciously invited me over for an interview. He interviewed me for the internship, and I got through. I got invited to be an intern. So that's how I started. I started as an intern, actually just picking up the phone lines, and eventually that led to my first paid job after several months of doing a free internship as a board op overnights. Which then led into doing production and then some honor work, and that's when I met you, Tocayo.
Yeah.
So
It was interesting because back then, you went by the name Samurai.
that's what they called me. Yeah, they gave me that. They
Gave you the nickname. Well, everybody
they gave
seemed
me
to
that
have
nickname.
a nickname back then,
That's right.
and it was because you had very long hair, slick back hair.
I had a
And you
ponytail,
look
yeah.
like a ninja samurai, and it was pretty cool. I mean, I was always jealous of your hair, so. But
Okay.
to get to where you and I start taking it to the next level, at the time that I came on board, I was doing overnights, and I was submitting mixes to the program director at the time, Nestor Rocha. His nickname, Pato, the
El
dog.
Pato.
So and like I said, everybody had a nickname, and he hired me, brought me on board, and it was an interesting scenario because there was some changes that were going to take place. And at the time, I was actually doing a rock en español public access show in Anaheim, California. And I kept, for a year, I was sending demos to Pato. And I kept sending demos, sending demos, sending demos. And I'll never forget the day that he called me. I was literally playing golf with some friends, and my phone rings, and I was like, what the heck? I was about to swing, and I turned the phone off, and, I hit the ball, whatever. And then after the hole, I checked the message, and he's like, hey, Fernando, how's it going? This is Pato over here at Super Estrella. I wanted to talk to you, have an interview, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow. So we meet offsite, and he tells me that he's making some changes with the morning show, and that he's going to do some moves, but that he would like me to be a host or co-host of the morning show. And he says, but I'm going to start you off at overnights, and we'll take it from there until things start transitioning. To cut a long story short, I ended up staying overnights the entire time that I was there. The dynamics ended up changing, and so they ended up going a different route. And so I was there for like about a good 2, 3 years, I think. But I was submitting mixes. He liked my mixes. So on the weekend, it was Alex Tercero and DJ Henrik who were
Mm-hmm.
doing the mix shows. But we had other DJs like DJ Eddie and Hessler and all these other guys. So we were all submitting mixes and stuff like that. Short time later, we find out about a new radio station that is supposedly going to compete with Super Estrella.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a call from an old buddy of mine that I used to work with at K-Love when I was working promotions at K-Love. And he says, "Hey, man, I'm listening to you. What are you doing overnights, man? You should be in prime time and blah, 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 blah." And I go, "Well, you know how radio is." He goes, "Ah,
Mm-hmm.
dude, we got to catch up." He goes, I need you to meet with you, man. I got something that I think you're going to like." And he had worked in radio, but when I met him, he was the mailroom guy for Heftel Broadcasting.
Yeah.
So that's when I met. That was the last time I spoke to him, and I didn't realize that he had actually moved on and done some programming for radio stations in Las Vegas. So he gets hired to program this radio station that was coming up in Los Angeles. To cut a long story short, I get to the location where he's at, and he ends up being the program director. So he offers me full time, full salary, benefits compared to my part time that I was doing overnights, making minimum wage. I said I gotta take the chance. So I move over, and Viva 107.1 is born, which was quite interesting at the beginning. And then I asked you if you wanted to come on
That's
board
right.
because they were looking for somebody to do production. And then you come in for an interview, and then you take over the production department. And why don't you take it from there and how things evolved into programming?
That's right, Tokayo. Yeah, I remember that time when you called me up, and I had been doing production and some honor work with at Super Estrella for some time, and really seeing that my opportunities were limited there. And when you called me up, it sounded exciting and interesting to me. And now I knew the radio station needed some help, so that was definitely something that in my mind, seemed like actually an even greater opportunity, because I knew I had a sense that I could join you guys and be of help. So the general manager really opened the doors to me thanks to your recommendation, and he was also very willing to listen to what I had to say, even though I didn't really know that much. To be honest, I had just started in the business, but I was a very curious kind of guy. I was always trying to learn more about it. So I had picked up a lot in the few years that I had already been in the business, and the general manager kept wanting to know, just what I had to say about our radio station, and that eventually led to him inviting me to be an assistant program director, which I thought would, it was definitely above what I thought I could be doing, but definitely was of interest to me. So I begun learning how to schedule music, the basics.
Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, not long after I start in that position, the general manager calls me into his office and tells me that he wants to make a change in programming, and it was all confidential, but he wanted me to take over. And of course, my first instinct was like, who are you going to get to, to program the radio station,
Right.
because you're going to need it, right? Like, I had barely started learning how to schedule music, like for a couple of weeks, when he called me in. And, well, to my surprise, he said, "No, I want you to actually take over." I said, "Oh, no, I don't think I can." And he's like, "Well, go home, think about it, and we'll speak about it." Okay. So he calls me in the next morning, and he tells me, "Well, what if you were forced to do it?" I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess I have to." And he's like, "Yeah, you'll get help from Fernando, from Fernando G, who knows the market and who knows the radio business, and you can get help from him, and from a program director that the company had in Chicago, who can be a service as your consultant, essentially." So I said, "Well, okay, I guess." And that's how I got started programming, Tokayo, with your help, with the help of Chris Schiebel, our
Yeah.
Chicago program director, who came in and taught me a lot of the really basics in programming. I got to work and started programming the radio station, and fortunately things just aligned. You know, we did some market research, which I implemented with the help of Chris, and sort of reformatted the radio station that gave us a good uplift in the
Yeah.
ratings. So things just worked, you know, in our favor, and we started really performing above, I think, expectations of the, you know, of the for the organization.
Yeah.
And yeah,
We
things
started. The thing was, is that with what you had was an instinct about music, which was very impressive. Because I mean, Super Estrella had been there for a number of years already, and
hmm
they were kind of like the niche for the Latin pop. There was K Love 107.3, which was a little on the more adult contemporary. It was a more skewing a much older
yes,
crowd. It was more like, you know, oldies and more love
soft ballads.
songs and
hmm
ballads and so on and so forth. But Superestrella was more upbeat. It was a little. It was, you know, generating, you know, a younger audience. And
hmm
so when we come into the market and you take over, you start breaking new artists, stuff that they
that's
had
right.
not taken a chance on, and you
Yeah,
started taking some risks.
definitely. Yeah.
What made you decide to go that route?
Well, I definitely had a sense that there was this audience that wasn't really been paid attention to or tapped into, you know. And what I thought, one of the things that I definitely uh, wanted to take advantage of was how do we, or essentially how to orient ourselves in terms of differentiating our station
Mm,
from what was out there. Even though I knew that the mission that I was given was to compete head on with Superestrella, I knew that I had to do something different. So I started looking at the makeup of the LA market, and I realized, wow, there's this huge Central American population that's
mm,
not being addressed. And what are they into? And I started noticing that there was this tropical pop music and what we now call reggaeton that was sort of in the
yeah,
early stages. And I thought, oh, this sounds like an interesting type of music that would really blend in with the pop. And there was, at the same time, there was all this pop music, what was hot in Mexico that wasn't being played in LA
yeah, yeah.
because it seemed a little bit too edgy, or perhaps, maybe, I don't know, just perhaps ahead of the times for LA, that I thought, I think we can do something interesting with these blends of maybe being ahead of the curve on the pop that was coming out from Mexico, and also um, tapping into this market that nobody's really tapping into with the Central American and reggaeton
Mm, mm,
rhythms that were beginning to really kind of get created. So yeah, I had just this notion that we needed to find a way to differentiate ourselves, and I found these two areas where we could take some risks. And yeah, there
yeah,
were definitely risks,
yeah.
but I thought we had nothing to lose, and I was too young to know any better. So
You
so we
said
just went for it.
just go in for it, dove in. I remember when you broke the artist Big Boy, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall this, but when you first played that song for me, I was like, oh man, I don't know about that one, and it had the lead singer from Son by Four who played the hook, and this kid, he calls himself Big Boy, and I think he was from Puerto Rico, and he was just the way he rapped to me was just so annoying, you know. And I was like, man, dude, I don't know about this song. You're all like, no, I'm gonna take a chance on it. I think it's gonna be good. And I was like, every time I heard it on our airwaves, I was like, I don't know why he's playing this song. I don't know why he's playing this song. Turns out it became a huge hit,
It was
Grammy
huge.
Award
Yeah.
winning, and I don't know what else. And it just took off. I mean, and it was like became the number one song for I forget how many weeks on the charts, and you broke it in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I have to say that song was actually brought in by the PD. Roberto Ibarra. I was still only the
Ah,
assistant PD, so he was
okay.
the one who actually knew of the song, and he was the one who was interested in taking a look at that song.
Uh-huh.
Now, after he left, I took over. That song had just beginning to get some airplay, and I think it was under my my job as a program director that eventually that song really turned
It
out to
took off.
be
It
a
was
huge hit
huge,
and took
man.
off. And I remember getting calls from our competitors
Uh-huh.
who were still my friends and
Right.
and telling me like, what are you doing? Like, why are you playing that song?
Yeah.
And of course, the funny thing was that 3 months later they had it in their
And
powers.
the powers.
Like they had to play it every hour and a half, 2 hours, on their
That's
station.
funny.
It was, yeah,
That's
it was a
funny.
huge hit.
All right, so let's start getting into the DJ mix shows and what you and I created back in the day.
Hmm.
So I was already doing mixes, and I think
Hmm.
it was only a couple of hours at the time when you first came on. We were doing just I think Friday nights or Saturday nights, one of the two. I forget which one it was. But then you and I sat down and we said, Let's talk about creating a bigger, better show to generate sales, nightclub sales, start generating sales. Let's talk about the aspects of DJ mix shows and what a program director looks for in a DJ, because there's a lot of kids out there that have a lot of talent mixing. They're scratching, they're doing all these amazing effects and stuff like that, but that doesn't necessarily translate to radio. Why is that?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, in the radio business, really what we're all about is playing the hits. And I think there's a different environment that DJs are used to performing in, which is the nightclub environment, where you have a crowd right in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to get instant feedback as a DJ. You guys
Right.
get instant feedback on what's working, what's not working, and you see it with people either gravitating towards the dance floor or getting out
Getting
of the
off the
dance
dance floor,
floor. And
right?
and so it's a different environment than the radio audience, which you don't see. You're in a studio and you're just hoping that people are tuning in and staying on for some time so that you can get the credit and the ratings that essentially is what the business is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I see that trips up some of the mixers when they try to translate their work into a radio show is that they don't consider that the way radio is consumed is different from the way people consume music in a nightclub. So the way radio is consumed is as we all know, as a consumer of radio, is we jump in our cars, or we have a radio in our homes, and we'll tune in and we'll be expecting to hear hit songs. And once you've gotten enough of it, you basically tune out. And so people are constantly tuning in and tuning out. It's not necessarily an appointment type of listening, where like in the old days, maybe in the radio industry, people were tuning in for a particular show and staying on, for a
Right.
drama or whatever at 7 at night and with the family, but modern radio doesn't work that way. And music radio certainly doesn't work that way. We're getting new listeners every minute, and we're getting listeners tuning out every minute too, not necessarily because of the product not being right, just they're doing other activities while they're
Right.
tuning in.
Right.
So one of the things that I think DJs have to think about when they try to translate their art into a successful radio show is taking into consideration the fact that you'll be having listeners in and out all the time. And what you want to do is make sure you're playing the hits often enough. Because one of the things that I realized from my work with DJs is that I think in the nightclubs, and you know better than I do about this, Tocayo, but I think in the nightclubs, you guys tend not to repeat the songs that often,
Right.
right? Like you'll
Right.
you'll play the super huge hits. Maybe you'll repeat them a couple of times throughout the night, but not as frequently as radio does. So in a contemporary hit music radio station, the top songs will be played, like they'll be in rotation heavy rotations for maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours. The song will come on again, and in the nightclub you probably won't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the keys, I think, is to understand in terms of how to translate your art form into a successful radio station show is to make sure the hits are exposed enough.
Right.
So if usually anywhere from five to 10 songs are the top songs on a chart, you'll want to make sure that these are present,
Mm-hmm.
in your show as much as possible, and you also want to play them frequently enough.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to play the hits and play them often.
Right. One of the things that I learned from when I got started in doing radio mix shows was having to come in with a hit,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that it's not like you're at the club where you're just nonstop. You
Mm-hmm.
keep going, you keep going, and you keep going at a club. Whereas in radio, you have commercial breaks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if I recall correctly, we had two commercial breaks. It
Mm-hmm.
was one around the 20-25 minute, and then
Mm-hmm.
another one at the around the 50 minute. So we're
That's right.
somewhere around there. So my sets were like about 20 minutes long, 25
Mm-hmm.
minutes, give or take. So within that 20 minutes, I need to make sure that I try to maintain the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing that a DJ needs to remember is that when you're coming out of a commercial break, a listener is expecting to hear a jam,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking that, oh wow, I just downloaded this awesome hit that's taking off in Europe in nightclubs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna spin it because I'm gonna be the one that's gonna break, and everybody's gonna go crazy, going to go, wow, what is that? It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because I remember when I first started doing my demos, I was like that. I was like, ah man, I'm gonna start off like this and I'm gonna start off like that, and they weren't getting any attention. Program directors were like, yeah, you mix good, but thanks, but no thanks. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand that concept of how that worked. So
Mm-hmm.
why don't you talk about how ratings work and
Mm-hmm.
how it evolves with how it intertwines with DJ and mixing and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's essentially two factors that are involved in the ratings equation for a radio station, and these two factors are how many people are listening to your radio station and for how long they
Mm-hmm.
listen to. So what every radio station tries to do, obviously, then is to get as many people as possible to listen to your radio station at any point in time, and then to capture that audience for as long as you can possibly capture that audience, because those two factors are what the ratings company essentially gets to measure in order for you to get an idea of what share of the marketplace your radio station is capturing. So you want to get as many people to tune in and for as long as possible. So with those two things in mind, what works the best to capture a bigger audience is, of course, playing the most popular music, and then to keep them on for a longer period of time is to continue to play more of the most popular music, and to make sure you're always playing the most popular music, in the best way possible, according to your audience's expectations. So
Right.
obviously there are different formats for different people, and different preferences, etc. So you want to be clear on which audience you're addressing and what that audience really wants to hear on a radio station, and then your job as a program director or as a mixer is to give those listeners what they're looking for and what they want. I think in the radio business, we can lose sight of that. That it's because we're so focused on just broadcasting that we forget that it's the first thing to do is really what I tell other program directors is the first thing that we need to do is to listen. and we need to listen to what the audience really wants.
Mm-hmm.
Or if sometimes, like in the scenario that we were talking about earlier of when I started programming, also listen to what perhaps is not going on in radio, but that there's something that you can intuit that there's an audience for, and then go for that as well.
Right.
So it's not necessarily just waiting for people to tell you, hey, I want to hear more of this. You could also be more proactive and look into what you could propose that you think your audience may like. But that all comes from being informed from being informed about what's really hot, what's really popular, and then delivering that over and over and over and over again.
Exactly.
I think those two elements are key. But in terms of how the ratings work, is essentially a combination of the amount of listeners you have tuning in throughout the week with how long on average each of those people tuning in are listening to the station or the show
Yeah.
for.
And it's interesting because a lot of times, especially with like the more pop CHR stations and stuff, you want to entertain the crowd, but you want to give them a sense of energy. And like we're talking about the having to make sure that you're playing the hits. However, you do want to include maybe something new that you got your gun instinct is going to take off. But those are the songs that you don't want to start off with because it's brand new and people don't really know it. You have to give them something that they're going to recognize right off the bat, and then maybe within the third, fourth, fifth song of your mix, you can bring that new track in that goes well, and then go right back into another hit. Those are the important factors that are needed when you're on air. Another thing that DJs make mistakes on, and I was doing, was that I've always been an electronic fan, electronic music, EDM, trance. That's always been my favorite style of music. So for me, I was always looking for that style of remix, which is cool for clubs, but again, not necessarily for radio, because the fact that you have to remember that your audience is much different that's tuning into the radio than those that are at the club. Those that are at the club, they're going for that style of music. They're going there because they know you're going to spin that style of music, those remixes, that energy that the EDM brings, or whatever it may be, hip hop or whatever. Whereas in radio, people are coming to it in many different ages, many different age groups, and they want to hear the original song, and they want to hear it in its entirety. So as remix DJs, as the on-air DJ mixers, you got to kind of find the right balance of remix, something that still has the essence of the song, but gives it a cool, energized beat and tempo. So those are the things that you want to look for, because there's a lot of remixes out there. I mean, especially now with the record pools that are out there, there's tons and tons of them. And you can definitely find some really cool versions of songs that will still be radio friendly and not necessarily be like more club friendly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tokayo. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, no, definitely spot on there. Yeah, that's another element that I'd see. A lot of DJs playing also like these long loops, which is perhaps works at a nightclub. It doesn't work for a radio show.
Exactly.
On the radio show, you want to make sure that you stick to the originals as much as possible. Although it's cool to bring in the variety of a different remix, but again, with the expectations of listeners tuning in and looking for something familiar, you want to stick to the originals as much as possible, and you also want to make sure that you're giving the listeners of the show the hooks of the songs, and for as long as possible. I think that's another element too that sometimes I see DJs doing. And of course, there's all this advice, take it for what it is.
You froze. Tocayo, did I lose you?
And it's
Frozen.
okay.
There we go. He's back.
I can hear you.
All right.
Okay, I'm back.
We had a slow connection. Internet is unstable. Slowing down. That's okay. Are you there?
I'm here, Tokayo. Can you hear me?
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So I was just saying, again, all this advice, of course, is subject to whatever guidance you may get from your particular program director. But in my case, one of the things that I like for DJs to do was to play the songs for long enough.
Mm,
That's another thing that I would also see some DJs wanting to get to songs like super fast. And I mean, that has its time and its place. It could be okay, but as a radio listener, I think I'm expecting to hear the song almost in its entirety. Obviously in a mix show it's different,
right.
but I want to hear enough of the song, especially if it's a song I like, rather than getting it,
Right.
30
Sure.
seconds in and then, oh, it's gone. The next song's on,
Exactly. And
so that's another
and it is
element.
interesting because from when I was mixing on air to now, it is much different. Um, Before, when I was mixing on air, I needed to spin at least 3 to 3.5 minutes of that song before I
Hmm.
was transitioning out. However,
Hmm.
now with millennials and
Hmm.
the next generation that's coming in, they do like them short because they want to get more,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I'm noticing is that it's moved from 3 to 3.5 down to 2, 2.5. Below
Okay.
that, I think you're cutting the song a little too short,
Too
and you're
short.
not getting the essence of the song. It's like you were
Hmm.
saying, people want to hear the song. They want to sing to it a little bit. You know what I mean? They want to get
Hmm.
into that hook. But,
Hmm.
you definitely want to play enough of it to where people are enjoying it and you're not cutting it out too quick.
Yeah.
And then that becomes another issue because then there'd be like, you might have played it, but you played it so short that now people are complaining, oh, well, they never play the song. No, I did play it.
Yeah.
It is in the rotation. No, I did spin it, but I just happened to play, 15 seconds of it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then the other thing is utilizing the effects, scratching, and all that stuff, which can be cool if you do it in the right manner. Doing too much of it also distorts the listening pleasure for the audience
Hmm. Hmm.
because I have heard a few DJs, and this was actually out of state where I heard a mix show. And when I first tuned in, I was like, "Wow, this sounds pretty good." The first song, of
Hmm.
course, and I heard the guy who was scratching it up and everything. But then we were listening to it, and it's like, well, let the song play a little bit, bro. You know what I mean? And it was just like, the guy was just going crazy, having fun, and scratching it up, boom, 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 and you never got to really sing to the song. And then he was already into the next song, and he started doing the
Yeah.
same thing to the next song, and so me as a DJ, I tuned out. That's
Yeah.
how bad it was. I mean, and I was like, okay, it's a little too much. And
Yeah.
there is a way to do that when you're mixing. Add a little bit of fun at the beginning, maybe boom, as you bring in the song, but then let it play.
Yeah.
And then as you get out, do maybe something else, scratching or, adding some effects, some delay, some echoes, some, backbeating, whatever it is that you want to add into it. But don't take away from the essence of the song because that is what makes the ratings for the radio station.
Right. Yeah. Go for simplicity. Your story made me think of this one time I was learning how to edit video. So I edited this little piece and I sent it to this gentleman who agreed to like give me some feedback on my video editing skills,
Mm,
and I'm all excited. I created this little piece, that was maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Like I think I interviewed one of our morning shows or something, and I created the like a mini documentary on their show, and then I sent it off to this guy. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was a well-known producer who agreed to just take a look. And his feedback to me, he was just cracking up. And what he told me was like my video looked like a video from the 70s because I had all these transitions in between like scenes, with like all the effects because I was
right,
just learning and
right.
I found them so cool, but I think that's the mistake that we can make, and the
Yeah.
guy was just like cracking up and saying, this thing looks like a really bad cheesy video from the 70s, cut down all those transitions. So I learned that simplicity is key, and I think for mixers, I'd say that same advice applies. If you go overboard with the scratching and the effects, you might be trying too hard,
Yeah.
so keeping it simple and clean, I
Yeah.
think it's the way to go.
You don't want to turn the audience off by trying to show off your skills. If they're coming to listen to you, give them enough to where they want more, you know, and don't try to show it all off in the first 10 seconds of your show. It's important. So, for you and I, we both started off the same way. We started off interning, running boards, answering phones, and things like that. Been some DJs that have gotten lucky and submitted a demo tape and they got hired. But the reality is that the best bet is pretty much to start as an intern and work your way up. I mean, that's been my feeling. I mean, from what I've experienced and still today, I think is important that people just get their foot in the door.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I think it's key. I think I was really lucky to have received that advice that I got from that professor at the time, who really encouraged all of us to just go in and try to get in as an intern, and I think that's the way to go. I think in any profession, of course,
yeah,
in some professions you perhaps cannot go in unless you already have some sort of degree or something. But
yeah,
in this business, I think we have that ability, and I encourage anybody who's interested in just giving it a try and learn from the ground up. I think eventually you'll find that it's the best way to really learn the art and the science of what you do
exactly.
is if you love it. I think that's one of the things that I find so cool about you guys who do this kind of work, is that you guys love this, so that passion and that love just brings you to these opportunities that I think you cannot get any other way. You're following your passion for this art form, will help you go through these phases where perhaps you may not see an immediate economic reward for doing what you do, but that it'll definitely pay off if you follow through on it. And to
Yeah,
me, I think that passion that you guys bring to this type of work will it's its own reward to
yeah,
begin with,
yeah. It is.
and if you follow it, you'll get the success that you're after.
Exactly, exactly. The thing is not to get discouraged, and my personal advice is get if you're looking to get on radio, whether it's being a mixer or being an on-air personality, get your foot in the door. If you've never worked at a radio station and you don't know the ins and outs, get your foot in the door. Check to see if there's anybody that you could talk to in the promotions department that might get you in as a street teamer,
Hmm.
or answering the phones, for taking requests and jotting people's names down when they win a contest and things like that. That's the important thing. Learn the ins and outs. Be patient, and slowly start submitting your demo to the program director and just start saying, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in this. And as long as they see that you're dedicated to your work and what you're doing, they'll give you the chance. I mean, I I got lucky in that, I got into radio back in the day when things were much more different. It was less corporate. However, the dynamics pretty much is still the same. People, they're still looking for people that are hungry, that are willing to come in and work hard and just build up. I mean, I got my nephew Lenny G, who started off as a street teamer. He's now on Mega 96.3 doing the mix show in the morning show, and he's doing great. They got, great ratings. So he started off the same way, just getting in little by little and working his way up, submitting demos, being patient, and you can make it happen. You can definitely make it work. And like we say, it doesn't mean that, for those DJs that like scratching and doing all the effects and everything, doesn't mean you're not going to have the opportunity, because once you start doing it right on air, then they're going to put you out in the events, the live events, the concerts. And that's where you can go crazy and have fun. That's where because you're going to have a live audience and it's much different. You're not on air. You're not catering to millions. You're catering to a smaller group, which is there for that particular reason, to check you out and to hear your style and your technique. So those are the things that I encourage DJs to do: practice, 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 and learn as much as you can. Get a mentor, go into a radio station, talk to people, talk to DJs. I grew up in a radio family, as you know. My father was in radio since before I was born, and we just happened to grow up into it. But my brother Marco was the one who introduced me to my first set of turntables, and I fell in love with it ever since. And the rest was history. I had my run on radio, and now I'm doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but I'm still able to DJ and have fun and do the thing that I've always had in my heart. And I'm thankful for people like you, Tocayo, who have been in my life and have given me how can I say, access to better myself. And so with that said, talking about access to better yourself, what are you doing today aside from consulting radio stations? You are also doing some interesting work. Tell us about what you're doing now.
Yeah, Tokayo. Now I'm also offering my 2 cents, I guess, as a transformative coach and consultant. So it's something that the personal development work is something that I've been passionate about for years, since I got into the business. On the side, I was always trying to learn more about how to grow and develop. So over these past few years now, 4 years, I've been training as a coach, and now I offer my services as a coach as well to those individuals who are looking to get more out of themselves and life, and really go deeper within ourselves, to find what's meaningful to us, how we can serve, how we can have a more meaningful life. So that's what I'm dedicating my time to now these days, along with some radio work. But yeah, it's fascinating work. We go pretty deep in our explorations and our conversations. But yeah, it's something that I'm as enthusiastic, if not even more, than when I found myself so interested about radio, because I think this just goes beyond any type of particular work that we may be doing. It's really more about finding out who we really are, what we're really here to do, and be of service.
Well, that's awesome, Tocayo.
And make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to tell you, I mean, on the personal level, you've helped me out many times just with simple conversations. So I'm truly grateful for that. Well, that about does it for us, boys and girls. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope that this special edition of DJ to DJ has given you some insight on how to become an on-air radio DJ mixer. And we wish you all the best of luck. So once again, we ask that you don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button so that you get notified, and hit those likes and place some comments. Don't forget that we will be having links down below. So if you want to get a hold of Fernando Perez and maybe pick his brain, and of course all his radio consulting as well as his transformative life expertise, it'll all be there. Thanks again, Tocayo. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Tocayo. Thanks for having me.